Hello! So today we're talking about chapter 1099, Pacifist. This was a great bridge chapter. It was an awesome chapter that was more foundational, answered some questions, tied things through. I think this was essential for this flashback, because the flashback really has been a bit of a speed run up to this point. It's been great, it's been amazing, but it's been fast, and I've been wanting Oda to slow down a little bit. And I think that this is the first chapter where we finally weren't hit with some major tragedy. We weren't hit with some really heavy emotional moments. We were hit with small emotional moments, small reasons to make us laugh, as well as some really interesting things to speculate on. So while it's not the most hype chapter, I think it was much needed for this flashback, so that it didn't feel like just a series of emotional punches that start to just kind of wear on you, and instead it made it feel more like the life story of someone. I think it was necessary. I'm really excited to talk about it, but I also want to let you know that I, along with hiring a new thumbnail artist who has been doing the thumbnails for my last several videos, I hope you've been enjoying, I also am working with an artist that's creating a custom art piece for every new chapter that I will include in all of my chapter reviews. So this artist reads the chapter as soon as the scans drop, picks a specific emotional beat within the chapter, and then creates an art piece and sends it to me for me to open after I read the chapter on Sundays. And oh my goodness, I'm really excited to share this with you when we get to that point in the video. But the plan is, unless schedules don't align one week, but the plan is for most chapters we'll have a unique art piece made just for the chapter review video. I'm really excited about it. Anyway, chapter 1099, still in the Kuma flashback, starting off with some real intensity. My goodness, I feel like Oda is trying to make up for having not been able to completely finish the last chapter in the shading and in just making it as clean as possible. And so in this chapter, he went hard. In this chapter, he was like, we are going to give you all the shading there is to give. These panels are amazing. They showcase the emotion and the pain, and how they showcase how Kuma is feeling as his people are being attacked. You can feel the heat coming off the page when you see this scene of fire depicted. It's horrifying, but also the emotions that this initial spread casts, the emotions that it captures are absolutely perfect. I mean, 10 out of 10 opening page already. So the last chapter ended with the elderly people from Kuma's side of the kingdom running up to him and begging him for help. King Bakori's gone and done it again. It's 16 years ago all over again. He's gonna burn everyone he thinks is weighing the country down. He's inhuman, I tell ya. They're slaughtering folks in the streets. Gosh, sorry. It's heavy. It's heavy. So this chapter opens up with that scene, and we see the fire, as I just described, but we also see all the people standing around in the foreground just watching it, just watching the fire happen. You can imagine that they've all run out of their homes, grabbed their loved ones. You can see some of them with children in their arms, and they're just watching their lives burn because that's all they can do. Once again, I've said it so many times before, but Oda is so good at creating villains that are so hateable. He's so good at creating villains that are so realistically despicable. Their rationale, their actions, you just want to hit him with a rock. A wise king must sometimes steel his heart and enact cruel reforms. Go away! Get out of here! Are you kidding me with this? And this panel at the very end of this opening scene where Kuma is straight on with his teeth gritted looking at you, coming after the king for what he does, for what he's doing to these people. I was rereading, I went back to the beginning of the flashback right before I read this chapter, and I was rereading the flashback just because I feel like it's probably coming to a close soon, so I wanted to get a refresher on all the details. And multiple times Kuma mentions in the flashback that he wants to be like Sun God Nika. He wants to be the liberator, and he specifically hones in on the people that are oppressed, the people that are being harmed. He wants to set them free. He wants to be the defender of these people. And that's truly what Kuma has been, both as a servant of the Revolutionary Army, but also in this scene right here. This is what he is. He's doing his life goal. This is what he thinks will make his life worth something. thing is by being able to help the people to defend the defenseless. And that's exactly what he's doing in this moment. And it's so sad because later in the chapter, at the very end of the chapter, when Vegapunk says that he's going to create the pacifistas in Kuma's image, and we'll get to that obviously, but when he says that and Kuma says, well, I mean, maybe this will actually mean that my life has some sort of purpose. It has some sort of greater meaning. And that's so sad because Kuma's life goal was to defend the defenseless, and we're physically watching him do it. We've watched him do it for the last several chapters as a member of the Revolutionary Army, but we're watching him save these people from their tyrannical king. He's taking on the title of a tyrant, which he didn't choose. It was given to him because of the scumminess, but he's willing to take that title on to defend them. He's putting himself at risk so that he can help them, and he still doesn't feel like his life has been good enough to be deemed worth it. He's taking on their pain every single Sunday, taking on so much pain onto himself that he's suffering, that he's screaming out in agony. And on top of that, running into fire for them and taking persecution for them and besmirching his name so that he can defend them. And still he doesn't view his life as worth anything. He still thinks, well, maybe these cyborgs could do it. That's so sad. Kuma's life is so filled with value around every corner. We haven't even talked about the fact that he's adopted Bonnie and taken her in as his own, and he is such a loving, caring, doting father. That alone makes your life worth it, Kuma, but look at all of the good that you're doing, and still you see yourself in that light. So Kuma is the new king in title only for the Sorbet Kingdom, but King Bulldog, who was the king before the king that is the terrible king that was before the king that's the wonderful king that's Kuma, he is really the acting king. So he's the one he's just running the kingdom again. I don't know what got him upended as king previous, because he's obviously comfortable with running the kingdom again. So I don't know if maybe Bakordi, what was his name again? Bakori. I don't know if Bakori maybe overthrew King Bulldog, and so he like stole the throne, and that's why Bulldog wasn't king anymore. And then Kuma stole it from Bakori, and now he's super angry about that. I don't know what the dynamics here were, but Bulldog seems pretty chill with just taking his kingship back. Like he's like, cool, neato, yeah, I'll run this kingdom again. And I do think that the gag with Connie was really funny. I didn't get it at first. I live streamed these reactions on my Patreon, and my patrons had to be like, do you remember during the reverie? Because I totally didn't, but then I did. And that's awesome. But I love the gag that she's like, try to be an old woman, and then they thought she was an old woman, but it was actually Connie. And then when Kuma says, I have to leave, and he picks up the wrong old woman and he's talking to her, but it's like Bonnie's over here. Oh my gosh, I love that nonsense. But also another thing that we were talking about on that stream, one of my mods sometimes joins me on the stream just because we're friends and we like hanging out. And when we got to the panel of Bonnie running as grown Bonnie, we were cracking up because Bonnie is a 6-year-old, and the idea that this 6-year-old was just sprinting, and then all of a sudden her strides are longer and her perspective is higher, and if you happen to be well endowed, then you probably understand running without the proper kind of sports bra is quite painful. So the idea that this 6-year-old is like sprinting and her whole perspective changes and her strides are different, and also, ow, every single run really hurts, what's going on with me? But she doesn't notice it at all. It's so funny to me. Like, she has to look in the mirror to realize that she's way taller and her body feels really different right now. But leaving that comedic perspective aside, it's actually a really sad scene to see Kuma look at her and actually think that it's Ginny for a second there, and like double taking and trying to figure out what's going on, because in the last, I think it was 2 chapters ago, when he was raising Bonnie up, we saw him caring for her and loving her, and then with that we kept seeing flashes of Ginny along with that. So we already know that as Kuma has been raising Bonnie, he's been thinking about Ginny the whole time. He's been raising her alongside Ginny's memory. So then to see Bonnie all of a sudden age up for whatever reason and he thinks it's his long lost love. deceased love is so sad. Also, Bonnie got her devil fruit off Paige. What? Why did we do that? Why did we do that? I know people have been discussing it. We talked about it, but my current theory on the matter is that so I know that people presented to me that maybe the celestial dragons like fed her the devil fruit as a baby before she left, like they did with Boa. I don't jive with that theory personally, just because she didn't mean to age herself up. This was a total accident. And just thinking really hard about it, get old, get old, get old. And then, you know, Connie's right there, old, and they think it's her, but Bonnie's in the background going, it didn't work. Just thinking about it really hard didn't work. Now, she eventually did figure out how to activate the powers on her own, but this was an accident, and it wasn't just because she was like, oh, I really want to get stronger so that when I'm older, I can go travel the world with Dad. That's not what did it, because thinking really hard about it didn't work when she was trying to get older, or at least it didn't work initially, and because she's thought about this before. We've actively seen her think about, when I'm older, when I'm 16, I'm gonna travel the world, or 10, I'm gonna travel the world with my dad. So we know that she's been actively thinking about getting older and traveling the world with her dad. So I don't know, maybe actually actively training for it is what did it, but the idea of her having this devil fruit since she was a baby and it just showed up now because plot, I just don't dig it. So my theory is that, and I'm sure I'm not the first one to say this, but I just read the chapter, so let me roll with it. My thought is that when the previous owner of the devil fruit died, it just respawned in the church, and Bonnie saw it and she ate it. Because earlier in this arc in Egghead, Vegapunk said something along the lines of, it's our greatest desires that cause the devil fruits to come to being or to manifest. I don't remember exactly what the quote was. I bet I could Google it real quick. Oh, yeah, Google's amazing. Okay, so devil fruits are created by one's desire. Whenever somebody wishes they could do something, or whenever they wish for something, a devil fruit with those properties is born. So, is born. Could that also be describing it being reborn or it respawning? So it's possible that because Bonnie's greatest desire was to age up, then when the previous devil fruit user of the age fruit died, then the devil fruit just respawned wherever the person who this was their greatest desire was. Now, how does that explain Swampy Caribou getting the swamp fruit? I don't know. How does that explain someone who wants to wear another person as a jacket? I couldn't tell ya. But for this particular fruit, I think that somebody must have died that previously had it and it respawned next to the person who this is their greatest desire. That's what I'm going with. But it happened off Paige, so I don't know. Yeah, this made me so mad. So when we saw the news article, I mean, really, seized the throne with violence by burning villages. You did that, Bakori! That was you! You burned the villages, and Kuma risked his life to save the people that were being slaughtered because of you! But because your throne has been taken, because the people didn't want you anymore, then you're like, oh, Kuma did it. Kuma set the fire. You suck! You suck. I love that when King Bakori comes in on his ships and you've got the navy and you've got all this and Bakori is shouting, a true tyrant who committed all manner of atrocities, kill him! And then all we get is this tiny little panel, doesn't even show the action, just a little descriptor, a little narrator's line that says, naturally, Kuma sank all the ships. Oh my goodness. What a way to speak to the power of Kuma. But it's like, we don't need to show you that, right? Like, we all know Kuma won this fight. It was a non-issue. Oh, I love that. I love it. And this is the piece of the story that my artist created a art piece for. Kuma crossing the world to find a cure for Bonnie. What an incredible display of the love of this father, that he went to so many islands. He went all over the world in order to find anyone that might have known the cure for Bonnie's terminal illness. It's such a beautiful display of fatherly love and of the fact that a parent will move heaven and earth to give their sick child any chance at life. It's absolutely beautiful. And what a display of where Kuma's heart is and how much he would do for this daughter that he loves more than anything. Plus too, the fact that he went to all the islands that that he sent the Straw Hats to just adds more layers to it as well. Like, these are places that he physically visited. These are places that he actually went to, which, you know, makes you think, okay, so this must be places where he went to and he knows that they're not hostile. He knows that they're good places. He probably got a decent idea of what they were doing on those islands. So when he sent the Straw Hats, I mean, I speculated, I'm sure you did too, when we saw where the Straw Hats went, that, wow, this kind of was the perfect place for them to go, because they got to learn the unique skills that they needed to learn in order to be able to grow over those 2 years that they were stuck here. And you know, I'm sure we've all kind of thought about that, and now we see that Kuma physically was there, and then he actually visited those places and knew what they were about, and he sent them to those places not as a random, okay, you go here, you go here, you go here, which we already knew it wasn't random because he asked them, where would you go on vacation? Not that he gave them a chance to answer, but he still asked. But it actually shows that there really was a lot of intentionality in where he sent them, because they were places that he was familiar with and that he trusted, and possibly also places that he knew what they were about, so he knew what might actually help these people that were the crew of Dragon's Son. And the captain, whose right-hand men were willing to take on his pain for him, just like Kuma was willing to do for his people. It just kind of ties everything in even more. It adds more layers to it, and that's one of my favorite things about this flashback, is that there's so many scenes from this flashback that we now look back at other stuff that's previously happened that already was interesting or impactful in its own right, and learning more about Kuma and where he comes from and what his story was just adds even more impact to those scenes from forever ago. I also think it's hilarious that they've kept the position of the captain of the Eastern Forces available since Ginny passed away, because I mean, yeah, it's sweet, it's a nice gesture, but also you gotta issue a new captain. This is an important mission you're on. You need to have captains. This is like, don't just leave that spot open. But Dragon is the one that sent Kuma to Vegapunk to be able to find the cure. And even though Vegapunk works for the government and Kuma has a target on his back being of Buccaneer blood, he trusts Dragon enough to be able to go to Vegapunk and know that he is going to be safe and he is going to get help. We have Bonnie. He goes back to get Bonnie, and I love her training up because she's working so hard. She's working so hard to be strong enough to get older, or to be strong enough to travel when she gets older, and it's so cute. And I also love her little carrying case that Kuma has her traveling around in as he goes to visit Vegapunk and plead with him to get help. This scene of Vegapunk's head being so massive that it's out of frame, and Vegapunk is the one going, "Whoa, you have a strange anatomy, sir." And Kuma's like, "Likewise." I love that scene. I think that's hilarious. I also love this little scene of Bonnie playing on Sentamaru's giant battle axe, and she's just like, Sentamaru's just like, "Get off my weapon! Why are you doing this? Stop!" Like, he has no idea how to handle Bonnie, and she's just like a kid, just playing on the deadly weapon. It's so good. But yeah, Vegapunk is not looking the best in this chapter, because I know it's just like a writing thing, but him just being like, "Oh yeah, I can totally help you. This is no problem. I already have the technology to cure your terminal disease. I've just chosen not to share it. I've got it in my back pocket. Didn't think anybody needed to know. I don't care that it costs a lot of money. Don't throw that at me. I don't care that it costs a lot of money. Someone in the world could afford to do it that would otherwise die because Vegapunk isn't sharing this information, and then those that couldn't afford it can do some sort of crowdfunding. Trust me, the parents, Kuma, if this solution were out in the world, Kuma, again, just like we saw in this chapter, would move heaven and earth to get his daughter in this program, whatever it takes. If it means begging for money, if it means working like crazy, like, he would figure it out. And Vegapunk's like, "I've got the technology. I don't share it." Like, and then on top of that, this little side eye, this look he's giving Kuma when he's like, "I assume you don't have money, so you'll let me experiment on you as payment then?" Which during the stream, they pointed out to me that, yeah, he hasn't made the different satellites yet. His head's still giant, and he now has a little bit of maniacal in him. There really was some evil in there, and It's on display in this chapter. But what a powerful concluding scene. Oh my goodness. This whole chapter, I think, was told so well, but this concluding scene was phenomenal, where you have these two men sitting around trying to plan for what they're gonna do, and Vegapunk describes this cyborg creation that he wants to make as mighty warriors from the future, deflecting bullets and saving the populace. They'll be heroes to the common man. And then they call them pacifistas because Kuma calls himself a pacifist. Breaking up that scene of them kind of imagining what these clone soldiers could be, what these incredibly strong, with an amazing defense, what these warriors could be for the people, defenders of the people, like the true thing that people could use and could look to and say, wow, this actually saved us. That's their dream. Cut to the person who will be in control of how they're utilized, and he sees them as nothing but weapons, and they're valued by how many they can kill. I love when Oda does this. He's done it all throughout this flashback, cutting between Kuma raising Bonnie, so gentle, so loving, and then cutting to him working with the revolutionary armies, and you see two sides of something. And in this, seeing the two sides of the hopeful dreamers who see a future of helping people, cut to the man who will be in control, who's going to be using them for violence and for control. Oh my goodness. Brilliantly done. Actually, a little side tangent because I forgot to mention it earlier in the chapter. There was a scene when it was at the beginning of the chapter when Kuma was rushing into the fire to save people, and Bonnie says, I hope he's safe. Dad's always such a chicken. And that's another great perspective moment where Bonnie has only seen Kuma as this doting, loving father who's cared for her and who's been very fearful every time she got near a doorway because, oh, I don't want the sun rays to hit you. I don't want this disease to spread any faster. So please come back from the doorway. Bonnie, be careful. I love you so much. Like, he's been such a kind, loving father. But we have seen him doing that and then cut to flashes of him fighting for the Revolutionary Army and then sleeping next to her and then cut to him fighting, feeding her, loving on her, telling her, you mean your jewelry? They're just jealous. And then cut to him fighting. We've seen that where he is so kind and loving to her, but he's still this hardened warrior. And then here we get another side of that perspective where we see Bonnie saying, Dad's such a coward. And then the very next panel is Kuma rushing into the fight to save the people. And I love that. I love that little flash of perspective that we got here, seeing the two sides of Kuma, the duality of Kuma as a father and Kuma as a warrior. And we kind of see that at the end of the chapter too, and he's like, yeah, I'm a pacifist. Well, literally earlier in this chapter, he wiped out a fleet of ships with no problem whatsoever. We watched him fight the king. Like, we know, we've watched him work in the Revolutionary Army. We know that he has no problem taking people down when he's defending the defenseless. So pacifista to him doesn't mean I won't raise a fist even if you hurt me. Pacifista to him means I won't instigate, but I will defend those that you're trying to harm. And that's exactly what they wanted from the pacifistas. They wanted them to be defenders of those that were being harmed. And unfortunately, in the hands of the celestial dragons, of the elders, they serve the exact opposite purpose. And what a powerful scene to end on, to see that contrast of what they want these creations to be and what they actually are. Couple that with the dialogue of it, of Kuma saying, I would make a deal with you to save Bonnie's life even if you were the devil himself. Cut to the man who came out of a summoning circle and was like the depiction of a demon when he arrived on Egghead and started attacking Bonnie. And then cut to, what's his name? Vegapunk calling Kuma a saint. And Kuma's like, no, I'm no saint. And what do the celestial dragons call themselves? Saints. So I love the physical back and forth that we got here of their dream versus reality, as well as the verbal back and forth of Kuma saying, I would make a deal with the devil, cut to the devil and what he's actually, or like the depiction, the representation of, dark forces and what he wants to do with their dream, with what they're dreaming up, and then calling Kuma a saint when it is, in fact, the celestial dragons that call themselves saints. Have I explained it enough? I feel like I just really over-explained that. Sorry. I just think that that's phenomenal storytelling. I think this whole chapter was phenomenal storytelling, but the conclusion especially really hit me hard. Anyway, this was very much a building chapter. This was very much a bridge chapter. It wasn't the most hype chapters. I know that these typically aren't like the chapters that get people talking, but I loved it. I thought that it was such a strong one, so I would love to continue chatting with you about it in the comments. What are your theories? What are your thoughts? How do you feel about it? I post videos every Monday and Friday on this channel, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays on the book channel, which is always linked in the description. I'll see you again soon. Bye.